Did you know that some of the most powerful and thought-provoking speeches in British politics happen right inside Parliament? Today we bring you one such unforgettable moment, an absolute must-watch from a British politician who is challenging the status quo, speaking up for change and shedding light on critical issues. Before we continue, I have one small request. If you're enjoying this deep dive into British politics, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Britain Briefed. Believe it or not, over 98% of you watch these videos without subscribing. It's completely free and it helps us keep bringing you the hard-hitting stories that matter. Now let's watch the clip.
My Lords, how appropriate that this debate should be scheduled on the day after President Trump told the world to grow up, play fair, pay your own way and become self-reliant. Because the stark reality is the UK cannot become self-reliant with the most expensive energy in the OECD. Hence the title of this debate today, my Lords, that this House takes note of the affordability of achieving net zero emissions by 2050. Let me begin by eliminating your Lordship's House on my own personal position on net zero. Number one, I'm not a climate change denier. In fact, in September 2015, I had the great pleasure of going to the North Pole with David Hempelman-Adams, and I witnessed for myself the polar ice cap melting. Second of all, I attended COP26 in Glasgow in November 2021 as a Scotland Office Minister, and I advocated enthusiastically for net zero 2050 and the leading role the UK played. And I pay tribute to my noble friend Lord Sharma in his place today when the UK took the presidency of COP26 in 2019, 30% of the world had signed up to the concept of net zero, and when he handed the role over 2 years later, that was 90% of the world had signed up to the concept of net zero. So when I took on the front bench role on energy in opposition just recently, I had no particular ideology on energy. But like any sensible business executive taking on a new role, I threw myself into this brief. And I went on a journey of discovery to learn from external stakeholders and experts what net zero really means for the UK. So please allow me to share what I've found with your Lordship's House. And perhaps I should open just with two caveats. The first from Dieter Helm, a considered expert in these matters, not particularly party aligned. And he says this topic is one of the most complicated energy, we have in the UK, one of the most complicated energy systems in the world. The second caveat is that with the vast sums of money at stake here, there are vested interests which are very loud and very vocal. So with those two caveats, let me give you an overview of what I found on net zero. In 2004, the UK was energy independent, i.e. we could meet our internal demand with our own supply. In the last 20 years, both governments have reduced our hydrocarbon production, such that we now import 40% of our total energy needs, costing 40 billion a year. The result is that the UK now has the highest electricity prices in the OECD, 5 times the US and 7 times China for industrial usage, and 3 times the US for domestic usage. These exorbitant energy prices mean the UK has deindustrialised, such that our economy and employment is today 80% services and 20% manufactured goods. The concept of net zero was to set a target in 2050, whereby we would switch our energy dependence from 75% hydrocarbon to 25% hydrocarbon. And yet today, in 25, we remain stubbornly dependent on hydrocarbons for 72% of our energy needs, with 40% being imported. The reality is that a 20-year experiment with renewables, mostly windmills and solar, has failed, because the add-on costs of subsidies, levies and grid upgrades have doubled household bills. Their intermittency means they can never provide reliable and consistent baseload, and it means that we will always be dependent upon gas as our reserve. Meanwhile, renewable storage is impractical. Today in the UK we have storage for only 30 minutes. Even accessing all of the world's combined storage today would only give us 12 hours. All the while, the upgrades to the grid required to distribute intermittent renewable energy from remote wind and solar farms has been costed by Aurora at 116 billion over the next 10 years. That amounts to £4,000 extra per household, or £400 per annum. All of which means the real cost of renewables is vastly more expensive than gas, which can be distributed through our existing grid network, while also being unreliable. And finally, there's been no employment benefit to the UK, because one, most of the capital equipment is manufactured offshore, mostly in China, And only 58% of our highly skilled hydrocarbon workforce are transitioning to renewables at wages 1/3 lower, which explains why our highly skilled workforce is hemorrhaging abroad. Now, my lords, in answer to numerous questions on this topic, the Noble Lord the Minister insists that our energy prices are high because of international gas markets. My lords, this is a false narrative. The reality is that from 2008, household electricity prices began to diverge from wholesale prices of gas and electricity, which were broadly stable until the Ukraine crisis in 2021. So why did household electricity prices accelerate away from the wholesale prices faster than the UK and the rest of Europe in the same period? And indeed, UK industrial electricity prices today are 6 times the price of wholesale gas, versus 3 times in Germany and 2.5 times in France. So something other than the international wholesale price of gas must be driving higher electricity prices in the UK. And we now know the answer. It's all the subsidies, the levies, the curtailment payments and the grid upgrades required by renewables, particularly offshore wind. And over the next 5 years, the total cost to households of renewable subsidies and levies is estimated by the OBR to be £95 billion. That is £3,400 per household, a staggering £680 per annum per household. My lords, can we now turn to baseload? The simple reason why renewables will never be reliable baseload in any energy system is because of the intermittency. Sadly, in the UK, sometimes the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow. In the UK, gas is relied upon as a reserve energy of last resort, or baseload, when the intermittency of renewables means that there's either no supply at peak demand or too much supply at reduced demand. This means that no matter how many wind farms we build, we can never switch off our gas reserve, which in turn results in massive duplication. And as a simple market mechanism, the market price will be determined by the marginal price of switching the gas reserve on and off, which has the grotesque outcome that wind farms are making huge profits based on the marginal gas price rather than their own cost of production plus a margin. Instead of making our own homegrown gas production more clean and more efficient, we weighed it down with the associated cost of offshore wind, such that 50% of the fuel costs of gas power stations are in the form of carbon tax. Moreover, our gas fleet dates from the 1990s, early 2000s, and is running at only 48% efficiency. Modern combined cycle gas terminals are the most carbon efficient way to produce power through gas, with emissions at 45% of coal-fired power stations. And at current prices, new CCGDs could produce electricity at £65 per megawatt, compared to new offshore wind at £90 to £120 per megawatt. And their capital cost is £500,000 per megawatt, compared to offshore wind at £3 million per megawatt, i.e. 1/6 of the price, and giving 100% efficiency versus 40% in wind. And meanwhile, nuclear remains the most emission-compliant baseload, which is why in France, the cost of their electricity is half the price of the UK. Turning now, my lords, to energy security. The geopolitics of 2025 mean that energy is no longer just industrial policy, it is at the very heart of national defence. The UK now imports 70% of its gas, largely from Norway and the USA, thankfully both friendly nations. 20% of peak UK gas comes through the Langeland pipeline between Norway and the UK. What havoc would be unleashed in the UK if that pipeline was ever sabotaged?
If this story speech accord with you, hit like, share it widely and drop your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.